All right. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon. This is Barton George, and I'm here with.
Ben Wilcock.
I had you stumped there for a while. What is it? What is my name?
I'm going to have to
Uh,
be on the ball here.
yes, it is. This is not going to be an easy puff piece. So this is
Oh,
sort of a do-over. We had a great podcast that we did at KubeCon in Chicago. The only problem was I didn't turn on the recording, or someone turned it off, or I think it was your fault. But anyway, now this is going to be even better. Um, and you are currently, which city are you in at this point?
well, I actually live in the countryside. I don't live in a city, but I live in the UK in the countryside,
Wolverhampton, Bristol, Surrey.
Somerset, close to Bristol,
Okay. See?
Somerset. Yeah,
Well,
yeah.
there you go. And so it's 10:15 here. What time is it there?
Well, it's 4:13 here.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah, we got
yeah,
that extra 2 minutes that
yeah. 2 hours and 1 hour and 2 minutes or whatever. Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
that's the thing. Yeah. Okay. Well, so what we talked about at KubeCon, well, actually, before that, who are you? Why don't we start with that? Who are you and what do you do?
Sure. Yeah, my name's Ben Wilcock. I do indeed work for VMware by Broadcom as a as a
That's
technical
right. As
marketer.
your new email will attest, there
That's
is
right.
no more VMware. It is Ben Wilcock at Broadcom.
That's right. Yeah, and I work in the technical marketing group associated with some of our cloud native products under the Tanzu brand.
I am quite familiar with that. So you
Mm.
were at KubeCon and you were there even a day early, and you were doing a talk at Backstage Day. Um, and there was a great article that followed up from the new stack, which I have read furiously. Even though we talked about it at KubeCon, I wanted to get another opinion, another view on this, so that I could really uh, get you there. But if we just start at a high level, what was your talk about? I know it was Backstage and AI, but tell the people sort of the general topic and what you were looking at. Then I'll drill down into these tough questions.
Yeah, it was indeed about generative AI and its impact on developers and uh, relating that story to one of interest to that community, the Backstage community. Backstage is a developer portal for those who've never seen it before. It's used quite often by large organizations to sort of provide a portal where developers, could be even hundreds or thousands of developers across a business, can all come together to share information about the stuff that they're working on. So it's an often used window onto the world of development inside a particular organization, and I'm pretty keen to see that window grow and include features like generative AI, for example. So my talk was all about why generative AI is important, and introduced some ways that you might want to start to think about integrating that into your daily life as a developer.
Yeah, I thought there were some in the art of some great tips that you offered. We'll get to them in a second about prompts and how you approach them. I think that's one of the key things, is that you've got this great engine that you can use, but if you don't ask it in the right way, you're not necessarily using it to its full advantage. So, to getting back just to Backstage, what would you say? Do you have any idea of the penetration, say, in Fortune 500 companies? Because what I understand is it's not just for uh, the unicorns or the Silicon Valley companies. It's also for the bigger companies as well. Has it
Yeah,
has it been picked up by most people? Some people? Where would it be in its adoption?
it's into the many thousands at the moment. So interestingly, on the GitHub repository for Backstage, because it's all open source, of course, one of the things that they track on that GitHub repository is a list of adopters. So if you're an adopter
Hmm.
of Backstage, you can go and add your name to that list. And that list currently runs into the many thousands. And it does include some very large organizations that everybody's probably heard of, like Lego and Expedia and various different banks and stuff. So car companies as well. So there's a huge sort of eclectic mix of very large organizations with a presence globally, all the way down to sort of very small startups, or even, I guess, in some cases you might even find some individuals. I'm not too sure. There's no reason why an organization shouldn't adopt it. It's a good piece of software. But yeah, they can add themselves to the list, and the list is many thousands long at the moment.
So that's a central hub, right, where people can communicate through, as you're saying, and then you have plugins, right? That you can. Is that what they call them? Plugins, add-ons? What are they? App
Yeah,
Store?
no, they do call them plugins. Yeah, there's a marketplace of plugins, and a place where you can go and have a look through this sort of library of all these different features that you can add. And yeah, absolutely, you can add plugins for all sorts of developer related things. For example, might be monitoring or observability, or where performance tuning or whatever. There's all sorts of stuff in there, all the way through to some fun things like the XKCD comic of the day, which you can also
well, there you
integrate
go. Well,
through a plugin.
what about Lego? They've got to have something fun in there, like the Lego mini movie of the day, where you can go in with AI and you can make Lego Batman fight Lego Cabbage, or I don't know.
Yeah, or maybe it should just be the voucher of the day and give you a voucher off some Lego.
Oh, now that I think I would sign up for that for my
Yeah,
kids.
that would definitely speed adoption, I think. So
So
yeah, there's
are those open source? Or are they a mix of? Are there people monetizing this besides maybe people who are installing, implementing it, services around it?
Yeah, I think so. I think there's definitely a mix, and there's probably some plugins that you can get that operate at different levels. So you've probably got some plugins that have like a free tier, and then maybe some additional tiers on
Hmm.
top of that. For example, if you're already a customer of a particular type of systems, let's say a PagerDuty off the top of my head,
Hmm.
then you can probably get access to some of the PagerDuty features that you might have paid for as an organization through that particular plugin. But at the
Yeah.
same time, there's a whole bunch of completely free open source stuff, donated and generated and created by like-minded individuals. I'm thinking, for example, of some plugins that are to do with Spring, which exist, which allow you to do
So
various
for those
things
who
in there.
don't know Spring,
Spring is a framework that works on top of Java. Java, the programming language, which I'm sure a lot of people will have heard about, works on top of Java to basically simplify programming tasks of all different shapes and sizes.
how old is Spring now? It's pretty
Over 20
long
years, yeah.
lived. Oh wow,
Yeah,
it's before I was
yeah,
born.
over 20 years.
So we're talking about plugins. I know somebody on this interview call that has done a plugin. But before we get to that, we're gonna sort of take a step back, and I wanted to learn more about things that you brought up in your talk. I thought a couple things were interesting with the studies, the one that Boston Consulting Group and Harvard did, as well as the one that McKinsey did. So maybe if you could start with the Harvard BCG one, and
Yeah.
we'll do McKinsey next.
Yeah, sure. So I did look at two studies. I wanted to do that for a couple of reasons. First of all, I wanted to set the scene. How there's a lot of discussion about the productivity gains of generative AI, but to separate out the sort of wheat from the chaff and to sort of look at it in more detail, I wanted to show a couple of surveys that discussed productivity at the center of their particular mechanism, if you like. So one was from BCG and the other one was from McKinsey. The one from BCG
So
was
just a question: how hard was it to find those? Have a lot of different groups gone and done these? I would assume that a lot of people want the answers to how much productivity can I gain? What kind of risk does it associate me with? And obviously, Harvard, BCG, and McKinsey are two big names, so it would make sense that those are ones you choose. But was there a plethora of surveys that you could have gone with, or were those basically the ones that came up on your searches as the main ones?
No, I've been sort of paying attention to what's going on in the AI space for a while. So that means sort of, doing regular research and listening to podcasts and doing all the usual sort of stuff. And these two stood out to me through the year. So if you think about the timing, we were talking together at KubeCon at the beginning of November. So
Hmm.
by that time, generative AI had been out sort of less than a year in its most popular guise. So something like ChatGPT or whatever. So it's not a lot of time for an in-depth study to be put together and to be run, and then all the data analyzed and presented into some sort of report. So there actually weren't a huge number available by the sort of end of October sort of time
Hmm.
frame where I was preparing this talk. So that made these two stand out in that they were specifically designed to test the assumption that generative AI can make you more productive.
And it sounds
So
like the various different much different sample sizes. One was like 40
yeah,
something, the other was 800, 700. And with that,
yeah.
now I'll turn it back to you and try not to interrupt you for at least a little while.
No, you're right. The BCG survey was the biggest one. It was about 750. I can't quite remember the exact number, but they used what they termed knowledge workers. So they separated knowledge workers into groups. These are consultants, really. These were BCG consultants. So 700 plus is quite a large number of consultants. So they designed a study where they would give these consultants different tasks,
So these are
and
their own
then
consultants then.
exactly, yeah. So they would give them these different tasks, and then they would measure how well they did on those tasks when they had no AI at all, when they had limited access to some AI, and when they used AI in a more rigorous fashion, and across two different types of challenge as well. One challenge was to do with analyzing data, for example. The other challenge was more creative in nature. So they gave them these two different challenges. They gave some groups access to AI. And then they measured the results, and the results were quite spectacular. They were really positive results, and they did show that AI generally makes you much more productive.
So when you say AI, were there certain tools? Was it Chat GPT, for example, or was it Bard, or was it GPT-4? What tools did they have access to, or what did they standardize on for this test?
I can't remember if they name checked it, but I think I'm right in saying it was ChatGPT, which at the time might have been GPT 3.5, might
Hmm.
have been GPT 4. It could have been sort of during the phase where GPT 4 was rolling out. I can't quite remember. I'm pretty sure it was OpenAI GPT branded rather than being Bard or something else. But um, that aside, it's more about I think it's more about the tasks that they were undertaking. So the tasks were quite generic in nature, if you like, but one to do with analyzing data, one to do with being more sort of creative. I think most tools would be able to handle both of those tasks equally well. They weren't trying to pass the bar exam.
Hmm.
They were pretty straightforward tasks that most of the sort of commercial AIs would be able to handle pretty well. I mean, Claude, for example, has got very good analysis capabilities. So giving an analysis task to Claude is pretty much going
And that's,
to
I was
help
going to
you.
say anthropomorphic. What is the, what is
Uh, uh, no, I won't say that.
oh,
Amorphic? No,
anthology.
yeah, it's
Uh,
gone now. It's gone.
okay.
Yeah, we know who you mean.
They came from ChatGPT, right? I think it was or
There's some of the
OpenAI, I
research.
should say.
Yeah, some of the researchers used to work for OpenAI. Yeah, but I think that's
Anthropic,
true.
Anthropic.
Well done, Anthropic.
See?
But yeah, I think that's true of most of these startups and spin-outs. There seems to be a sort of a core group, I think. So that was really interesting, that BCG survey, because it did show that there were significant gains to be had by using some sort of GPT like generative AI to support you in the work that you do as a knowledge worker. And they also found that the benefit was more pronounced the more inexperienced you were, the more junior you were, essentially. So for those who didn't have as much experience, perhaps the younger members of the cohort, they would perform 45% better than without AI. Whereas for those that had a lot of experience and had perhaps already achieved great things in their careers or whatever, they were about 17-18% more productive, but in both groups more productive. If you could get a 17, 18, 19, 20% increase, even for a very
Oh yeah.
experienced group, that's still a really good increase. So they basically sort of proved through that experience that, yeah, there's something here. There's definitely a way to become more productive by including generative AI in the way that you work.
I wonder if the with the younger people, the more routine, lower level work that generative AI is best at makes up a much bigger percentage of their work. So
Yeah.
whereas someone more senior probably has the junior people to do it, so they don't have to worry about it anyway. But I think that's one of the big things is at this point it's lower level work that's being done, and so that's where if there are to be redundancies, if there are people who are just working at that level, those are the ones at risk of I don't say losing their jobs, but of having their work very much change.
Well, I want to temper this. There's always a discussion about folks losing their jobs and stuff, and I completely understand where that is coming from. But I can only speak from my own sort of experience and my own thoughts about how it impacts the industry that I'm in, which is a sort of software development industry. And AI makes a lot of mistakes. So if you don't know how to spot them, you've got a problem. So if you take people out of the loop, you're basically taking away all of that experience that you've built up over the years to be able to produce the right thing, do the right thing, build the right thing. You take that out of the loop, the result is going to be a mess. So it's not really possible to do that. I think where AI comes into its own in terms of developers and the area that I work in is in that sort of productivity gain. There's always been a crunch on developer time. You can only have so much of a developer's time during a year. Now, if you could get an extra 20% out of that, that's a whole new product. That's a whole new set of features that you wouldn't be able to build otherwise. So I actually see it as helping companies maintain the current, staffing levels pretty evenly, but achieve more from that same finite amount of staffing. And I think that's the more likely scenario in this particular industry, at least, and probably in quite a lot of others as well. I think there's certainly a lot of crossover there. I think the organizations that do AI best will figure out how to better leverage and invest in what they have rather than divest.
I think just to get into some of the perils before we get to the McKinsey study, since you brought it up, I know that from my own using of ChatGPT, so I was putting together a presentation on DevOps, and I just want to get some basic facts. And for fun, I put in, what role did these people have in the forming of DevOps? And I thought, I'm going to put my name in here. And it was something about Barton George is central and key to the foundation of DevOps. It's not true. I would like to think I was, but no, it's definitely not true. So there are things that if I didn't know about it, obviously I'd know my own name, but if I put in Fred Smith, Ben Wilcock, he was one of the primary dancers of the Joffrey Ballet and has won many accolades in the early 60s. You have to have that at this point. You need to be able to have some information about it that you can't just go with it. And I think there was a stat in there about talk about hallucinations and bad results was like 50%, and maybe this is regarding coding, but what was the error rate?
They can be quite high. Yeah, I don't know if I found a percentage in these particular studies, but others will exist where it's been mentioned. But yeah, it's the most often cited issue faced by executives. So when they look at the concerns that they have of introducing AI, right at the top of the list, even before security, is sort of accuracy. Security is not far behind, but accuracy comes right at the top. And I think that's based on experience of using these things for a few years, and figuring out what they're good at through things like the little chatbot that you get in the corner of the window when you go shopping or whatever, on your shopping site. There's all sorts of ways that they can sort of monitor what's going on. And I think it's quite right to say that, accuracy is definitely one of the larger concerns that they have at the moment. Remember, generative AI is a prediction mechanism. It's designed to it's designed to create very persuasive language. And the more persuasive something is, the more likely you are to believe it as being true. So that's why Barton George turns up as, the DevOps master. It's a very persuasive argument, but it's not actually true.
So, right? So if we get into that, it gets into the question I was going to ask about how do you ask it? How do you prompt it in a way that gets you what you want? So that you're getting accurate things. There was both what was it? I forget. It was both the structure and the style that was talked about, that you talked about in your presentation.
Yeah, I did. I introduced just a few ideas based on existing sort of prompting techniques that folks could hopefully take away with them and try in their daily lives to see if it improves the accuracy of the results that they're seeing when they're using generative AI for creating presentations or whatever it might be, right? Because there's 100 different reasons why you might need a generative AI as a developer, and not all of them are to do with creating code. In fact, I'd probably argue that a small number of them are to do with creating code, and then there's all these other ancillary tasks that still take up time, that are repetitive, that you could apply an AI to. So having a good sort of grasp of prompting is kind of useful. So I just shared with folks a few hints and tips on how to get better at prompting, like using the role, situation, task method, where when you're when you're creating your prompt, think about, first of all, is there a role that the system should take in order to be more successful at answering your question? So if you're
for example, what type of question would this work for?
Yeah, so if you're asking a legal question, tell the AI you're a solicitor or you're a lawyer or whatever. If you're working on a database problem, tell the AI it's a database analyst, right? This just sort of configures the conversation, if you like, and sort of suggests a role play scenario in which the AI should try and prioritize certain types of knowledge as being used in the response. Then there's the situation, what situation am I in? What is it that I'm actually asking about? So, I have a legal dispute with a neighbor, or I have a database that I want to create, or I want to join a few things together, or whatever it might be. Tell it the situation that you're in, and then be very specific about the task to be done. Your job is to do this, create a SQL command that will join these two tables together, or will expose a particular piece of data, or will give me an idea of what the precedents are over a boundary, or whatever it might be. So just simple sort of techniques, really, like role, situation, and task, that just help you create a prompt that is hopefully more likely to gain a more accurate response from the AI than you would otherwise get just sort of randomly asking questions.
So which was that fall under structure or style? Which was the one that says, what I was going to say, it's, show your work, the thing that you talked about?
Yeah, so this is a sort of difference between show me and tell me prompting styles. So you can ask a UI to show you something where you might provide an example of the desired result. So you might say, summarize the key points about a cyberpunk game, the genre, in 2 to 3 sentences using a similar engaging style to this one. So you sort of said, here's an engaging style, here's a review that I like, here's its engaging style. Create a new one using the same sort of style, but do it about this other topic. So it can then you can sort of show it, or have it show you even what it can do in terms of being creative, but you're setting a sort of a slight boundary, if you like. Whereas the sort of tell me mechanism is more about telling the AI exactly what to do. So you're sort of spelling out what good looks like. You're saying as part of your prompt, I expect to see these particular things, like don't repeat yourself, and do it in your own words, and give me the important details, and be concise. Concise is a great one, because if you sometimes get those 2-page answers, just telling the AI, like, okay, be concise, will allow it to prioritize answers of a shorter nature. So it will hopefully not give you the sort of 10-page readout that you've then got to go through, which takes longer than just Googling it.
So does it learn? Does it learn from your questions? In other words, one person's concise is another person's verbose, right? So if you say concise.
It's already been trained. So all of these AIs, the corpus of training data is multi-terabytes in size. So it's already been trained on terabytes and terabytes of information. So it already knows the difference between being concise and not being.
But that's such a relative term. In other words, I don't know, let's just Civil War. I'll just pick that up. Please give me a concise history of the Civil War. And somebody has one that's like 3 sentences, and just, well, yeah, that's not exactly concise. Is more like 2 paragraphs, or they give you a longer one. That's why I was wondering if there's a way that it learns from you in that. So for you, Ben Wilcock, concise is 4 paragraphs as opposed to 3 sentences, as opposed to 2 pages.
Well, maybe then you would use the show me sort of solution. So you would say, here's what a concise effort looks like. Now create me a new concise effort in this other topic, where you've actually sort of shown it, given it some training data of your own, remembering that the context in which you're writing is training data for the answers that come next. So you're always, everything that went before in a conversation is always training what happens next in the conversation. It's also important why sometimes you should, I don't know if many users do this, but if they do, if you're, just going back to ChatGPT and just asking your next question every time, and you haven't noticed that actually your conversations, you can have more than one. So you should quit out of one conversation and start another one for new topics, because it's all included in the same context, right? So context is always used as part of the decision making mechanism for an AI when it's generating responses.
Cool. So I'm having a lot of fun talking here, but I want to make sure we get to we get back to chat or back chat. See what I did there? I'm teeing it up. I'm teeing people saying, what is he talking about? Well, we'll talk about it in a second. Let me see if there's anything. I guess the quick part would be the McKinsey, and then then we can get back to chat.
Yeah, so McKinsey also ran a study, but it was a much smaller study. It was about 40 or so, but it specifically looked at developers. Can developers be more productive? So this wasn't knowledge workers working as a consultant on a business problem. This was developers working on developer problems. And they gave this, again, they split them up into groups, and they gave the different groups access to different generative AI tools. So
was it two groups of 20, something like that?
Yeah, I think so. Or was it 3 groups? Oh, God, I can't remember.
But it wasn't it wasn't like 800 developers. It was
only 40 in total. So it's 40 in total, split into 3 groups. But what they did find by doing that was that providing developers with something akin to Copilot, so GitHub Copilot, where you've got this fill in the middle technique, basically inventing new code for you based on your current position in your
or documentation
based on your position inside a piece of inside a coding file. They said, yeah, that's great, but it doesn't take care of all the other stuff that developers do that are not inside an IDE and not related to code. So where they found that the most productive group was a group that had access to tools that were not just inside the IDE, but also outside their IDE,
Mm.
something like ChatGPT, as well as something like a Copilot. And they found that those two things together really did boost the productivity of developers, because it allowed them to take care of tasks that were purely to do with coding, but also to take care of tasks that perhaps had absolutely nothing to do with coding at all and were more about just what it's like to be a developer in an organization, doing 360-degree feedback responses for
Mm.
colleagues, or
Oh, that's nice.
working, analyzing data, or creating test data, or doing stuff that that doesn't necessarily happen inside an IDE.
So, once again, before we get back to chat, how do you use generative AI in your daily life for coding or for writing or for um, doing things for around the house? Or, I want to buy a this, and tell me about what I should look for. Or
All of the above, really. So I'll give you a few examples. Coding, yes, obviously something that's like a code in the middle is great. So in VMware, we're internally trialing a piece of software to do that called SafeCoder that we've created with our partners at Hugging Face. So
Mhm.
that's an IDE plugin for Visual Studio. So you can be in your Java code or in your JavaScript code or in your Go code or whatever you might be working on, and it will start to suggest how to create new functions or work on a particular problem. So it can do that from inside the IDE. Then there's all the stuff you do outside the IDE, especially as someone like me, as a technical marketer. I'm writing stuff all the time, so
Mm.
I can use these AI tools for things like ideation, coming up with ideas for blog
Mm.
posts, or working through particular scenarios, trying to figure out how to write about a particular topic, or maybe how to make something more concise, right? If I've written something, I'm thinking, oh, this is a bit of a wordy diatribe. I think I'd like to cut it down a little bit. Then I can put it through a tool like that, and it can help me try and prioritize the bits that have the most impact, perhaps in that particular piece of content. I use it at home for image creation. My son runs a YouTube channel, so we use it there to help us create imagery for things like thumbnails and stuff through
That's cool.
generative AI.
Do you use
And then
Dolly, or what would you use for that?
actually, I use Bing quite a lot. Bing is
Hmm.
probably the most underused resource, because Bing gives you access to GPT-4 and DALL-E 3
This
through,
podcast is brought to you by Microsoft, makers of Bing and Copilot, now through GitHub. No, that's a joke. We're not sponsored by anything.
No, it's really good. It's basic but usable, and then they have a number of tools on top that just help sort of work through the process. So yeah, that's really given us a way to be more inventive with thumbnails, for example. And then there's just stuff around the house. Currently thinking about maybe I should get an electric car or something, but we have certain requirements. So I went to one of the GPT like tools, and I just said, look, give me a list of electric cars. I want to know the widths, the heights, the dimensions of those, what sort of
Hmm.
range they've got, that sort of thing. It can do that instantly, which used to be hours of spreadsheeting and looking at websites and pulling out, individual bits of data, and it's done it in a few seconds. So
So,
there's
but that
loads of
brings up
ways.
that brings up the error rate, right? So if you
Mm.
do, and it says the Rivian is this, the length is this, whereas Tesla's this, but in reality, the Rivian is not that big. It's actually this big, and so that's where how do you double check that, or how much? Because then that makes it more work.
Yeah, you definitely should double check the things that you really care about, but there is, first of all, so there's a couple of different ways of doing this. So first of all, is for me, it was blindingly obvious when it made an error. So, for example,
Hmm.
in dimensions, width, depth, height, it made an error on one of the cars in the list, and it was really obvious because it would be entirely square in dimensions.
And you've seen it, and it's not square.
That looks pretty suspicious. The other thing is that the modern generative AIs, we talked about context a little while ago. they now behave in such a way that they add information to their context that they're missing. So if they feel that they don't have the right information, it will go out and do a web search, find the information, then collate that as part of the context and bring that into the data. So they're very, very good at creating tables and doing all sorts of other things with tables, like reordering them in a particular way or separating them into clusters, or, you know, all that sort of stuff. They can do all that really easily. And that's before we've even provided it with additional data, which is something that I've done before, you know, summarizing reports, having a look at, you know, trying to pull information out of these studies, for example. You know, one way is to feed the study to an AI and then just ask it questions like, okay, so how many developers were in there? And, you know, what did they find? And was one tool better than two tools and all that sort of stuff? So they're really, really good at that as well. And they're only improving all the time.
All right. Well, we've kept our listeners waiting long enough. Let's get to your plugin.
Oh, yes,
let's get back to chat.
My plugin for Backstage is called Backchat. So what I wanted to try and do was give folks a mechanism to start trialing what it might feel like to have some sort of generative AI available inside Backstage, but in a really flexible way, because folks not quite there yet. There was a study in the Register last week, I think, that talked about how many people have actually put generative AI into production. So how many enterprises have put generative AI into production? And it's a small number right now, because
in production, in what way? What does that mean?
In some sort of usable way. So put it into their cloud, made it available to developers, or made it available to customers, whatever it might be. It's a small number right now. And I think the reason for that is that folks are grappling with the various constraints upon them, things like regulatory constraints or privacy constraints, or you know, the desire not to put something out there that is then used in a way that they weren't perhaps expecting. So there's a lot of risk associated with AI at the moment. So one thing that I wanted to do here was try and eliminate some of the risk by hooking together some open source private AI tools, things that you run yourself locally, either locally on a laptop or locally on a server that you own or something like that, where you know, just you have access to it, or just a small group has access to it. So that's what Backstage does. It brings some open source tooling in and it integrates it in a way that is graphically part of the Backstage GUI. So if you're used to using Backstage for your software catalog, or to have a look through your API definitions and all that sort of stuff, all that is still there. But you've got an extra button you can click when you want to ask an AI a question. Now, it's pretty simple. It's not trained on any of that information in Backstage. It doesn't contain any information from your organization, but it does give you a bunch of tools that allow you to start exploring what that might look like. And then you can obviously take that further if you want to. So if you want to then start training these AIs, then you can start to train them, and you can start to maybe get more information out of them that's relevant to you. But I wanted somewhere for people to get started. And as a get started project, I think it's pretty good.
So how do people get access to it? They just go into the App Store and they type in Backchat?
No, it's not in the. I've not put it in the App Store purposely, because I'd actually like folks in the open source community to come and take a look at it, really, and try and contribute to it. So I'm looking for contributors at the moment, but yeah, we can put a link in your show notes or something that'll give them access to the GitHub repository, and they can go and find out all about how to install it, which is pretty simple, because all Backchat plugins, Backstage plugins are basically JavaScript, so they come down through the npm registry. So it's registered in the npm registry. You'll be able to add it to your Backstage really easily, and then I'll show you how to start up the various AI tools, and you can choose from 5 or 6 different tools at the moment. So you can choose which one's sort of right for you, which one is easiest for you to get running. All of them are based on Docker images, so you should be able to get those up and running either on a developer laptop or on a developer server or something pretty easily. And then you can take it for a spin and see what you like. And then if you like the idea, come and help to build out the rest. I'm really, really interested in hearing from folks who want to take that code and run with it and make it do more spectacular things, or maybe have a permanent UI, or maybe have some sort of fine tuning that's based on Backstage information, or maybe have the ability to bring in RAG, retrieval augmented generation, where you can use your own documentation to maybe influence the answers that comes out of the AI. So yeah, take a look at it, please, and give us your feedback.
So tell us what the URL is now to go. Well, we can put it in the show notes, as you said, but just so that I stumped you.
Have a look at VIA, so VIA dot VMW.
VIA.vmw.com
/backchat.
Backchat.
So, in shorter words, via vmw.com /backchat.
All right. Yeah. So we'll put like one of those little subtitles here where people can see it. And so after your talk, have you had people check it out? Have you had interest, or what's the way that you're looking to get out the word?
Yeah, I have actually. A few people came to see me after the talk at Backstage Con, and were very interested in sort of taking the idea further. And I think they're exploring their way around the code base now and trying to figure out, okay, how do we get started with this? What would we like to add? What would we like to be on the roadmap? So all of that is up for discussion, really. I'm just really interested to hear from like-minded individuals who would like to have generative AI exposed through Backstage. I think it's really important. I think if a developer has to leave Backstage in order to use generative AI, that's a worse experience than being able to use it within Backstage. And then, of course, if we can get that sort of training data and retrieval augmentation going or something like that, then we've got more avenues to be able to expose things like tech docs and have information coming from live systems, maybe added to what the generative AI model knows about, so that you can then start to ask it questions about your systems and your environment that you live in. But that's not going to happen without some help. I need some help from folks to do that. So yeah, if there's folks out there who are interested, please get in touch. It would be great. You can contact me through LinkedIn as well. So I'm Ben Wilcock on LinkedIn. That's a really good way of getting help. Just one L, yes.
Yes.
And not the other Ben Wilcock, as you mentioned earlier, this other Barton George. There's this other Ben Wilcock who really is
a musician or something, I think.
Really is a jazz musician in New Zealand. So hello, Ben, if you're out there.
There's actually a Barton George in Australia that I'm friends with. I got in Facebook, so that's always kind of fun. So is there a Backstage AI SIG? Is for those folks within Backstage who are interested in AI, where should they go besides checking out Backchat?
I don't know. I think probably checking out Backchat is the place to go right now. I don't think there is a SIG or any sort of special interest group around that. So yeah, make your voices known through Backchat, and we'll see if we can grow that body of people out. Maybe we'll have a group somewhere that helps to grow that body of folks out. But I haven't heard of any such thing. So if folks do know of one, then please get in touch and let us know.
So you're there on the ground floor. I mean, this is where people can go to get involved in AI at Backstage.
I hope so. Yeah, I'd really like that.
Well, Ben Wilcock, this has been awesome. I appreciate it, and hopefully this time when I pause the recording, it will actually be there. And if not, this has been a great conversation anyway. So anything you'd like to tell our guests before you leave about AI? What you had for lunch, anything?
I think AI is really exciting. I think it's one of those once in a generation kind of technologies. Really, it's been a while since the last one. Probably the last one was kind of cloud nativeness. That was the sort of last once in a generation technology in my area anyway. So I find this really exciting. I'm enjoying very much getting to know more about it on a daily basis. Yeah, it's good.
Cool. Well, once again, Ben Wilcock, thank you so much.
Thanks so much, Barton. Enjoy your day.
Cheers.